Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks, and today I'm going to be wrapping up the books I read in May and also talking about the 5 books I read in January that were HarperCollins titles, so I did not mention them in my wrap-up. I figured this was a good video to combine those two things because I only read 4 books in May, and 3 of them I talked about quite a bit in my vlog that I just posted, so I'm going to go through those pretty quickly and then get to the 5 HarperCollins books I read in January because there's some that I really liked and I do want to talk about them. The first book I read in May was Primal Animals by Lynn Rubin. It has a beautiful cover. I gave this 1.5 stars. It follows Arlie, I think 16-year-old girl who is going to sleepaway summer camp for the first time. It's a camp that her mother went to when she was growing up, and she really loved it. Arlie's kind of nervous. She has probably some sort of anxiety disorder as well as a intense fear of bugs and insects, which is why camping is obviously going to be a little bit difficult for her. But she gets there and instantly bonds with like her cabin mates and develops a crush on a girl named Winnie. But people at the camp don't seem to like her, and she gets swept up into this secret society situation. I thought this book was a waste of my time. Nothing happens in the entire first half. The secret society is mentioned in the blurb or the description in the front cover, but it doesn't happen until halfway through the book. And then what happens in the second half goes so, like, people don't react to things like that. It was just so far beyond. It feels like the first half of the book takes weeks and then the second half of the book takes place in like 3 days. It was bizarre. I wish I hadn't read it, or I wish I hadn't spent my money on it, even though it is such a beautiful book. But yeah, I just unfortunately did not enjoy this. Next, I read A House with Good Bones by Kingfisher. I also really love this cover, and this follows Samantha as she is visiting her mother for an extended stay. She was working on an archaeological dig, but before the book starts, the dig has been suspended indefinitely due to something happening, and she's excited to visit her mom. She hasn't been there in a while, but she walks into the house and realizes that her mom has redecorated the house back to exactly the way it was when her grandmother was alive and owned the house. And she's like, that's weird. Why is my mom acting so weird? Why is she being so jumpy? Why are things that are very weird happening in this house? And it kind of becomes a haunted house possible situation. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was entertaining and interesting. I really loved Samantha, the main character. I thought it was a little slow to start, and I didn't like love the pace of the reveals at the end. I don't know. I feel like I have complaints, but I just overall had such a good time that it didn't really matter. So I gave this book 4.5 stars, somewhere in that range, and I just really enjoyed it. I'm in a horror mood right now, and this is just what I needed. Next, I read Look for Her by Emily Winslow. This was your really standard, dependable, like British detective mystery. It looks like it's going to be more of a thriller, I think, from the cover, but there really wasn't much thrills or suspense. It like truly is a mystery, and it follows Maurice Keene and Chloe Froman. They're both detectives, and they had worked together in the past. This is the 4th book in a series. I've not read the first 3, and you don't need to read the first 3. And he is assigned to look into a cold case of Annalise Wood. She was a teenager who went missing in the 70s, and then in the 90s her body was discovered. It is now several decades after that, and more DNA evidence has come to light indicating that the body may or may not actually have been Annalise's, and if it's not, like, what happened. And so they're investigating that. I thought this was just extremely average. It wasn't particularly interesting. There wasn't that much like tension in the plot, like, despite the fact that there is a mystery about a murder. It didn't feel like there was many obstacles for the characters. There was also a third perspective of a therapist named Lori, whose chapters honestly feel a little bit more like the emotional through line of the book. I just thought that this was fine. I liked that there was very open communication between the characters, so that wasn't really one of the conflicts, but it wasn't like mind-blowing. It was what it was, and I'm not going to read more from the series, or probably more from this author, because it was average in a way where, like, I can read average romances, but I still have like a really fun time and I want to read more average romances. But this was just like a little boring. Like 2.5 3 stars. The last book I read in May was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, and this is like a literary noir translated from Polish about a older woman living in an isolated rural community, and people are dying, and she believes that the animals are taking revenge for the way that these people are treating them, like hunting and eating meat, etc. And she's an interesting, unreliable narrator who spends a lot of time thinking and being very internal, and she really believes in astrology and talks about that a lot. I unfortunately did not enjoy this that much. I can see the craft. It literally won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Like, I can understand the value here and what other people saw in it, but in terms of my own enjoyment, this was like a 2.5. I just found it very boring, despite the fact that I did think the ending was interesting. I really cranked up that audiobook speed, which is usually not a good sign because it usually means I'm trying to like get something over with. But yeah, I didn't think this was like the best one for me. I wish I had liked it. It just has such a cool cover, has such a cool name. It had been on my TBR for several years, so I wish I had liked it, but you know, it's not the end of the world. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the 5 HarperCollins books I read in January that I didn't mention in my January wrap-up because they were still on strike, and I support unions. So, first is Always by Lynsay. This is a medieval historical romance, which is not a time period that I usually read about, and it is about an arranged marriage between the illegitimate daughter of the king and just like a knight, like a noble. The book basically starts with, I don't remember any of their names, so don't ask, but it starts with the male main character, the guy, discovering his fiance sleeping with the stable boy, and he's like, women suck, I don't ever want to get married. And immediately the king comes in and is like, I heard you're not engaged anymore, come with me, you're gonna marry my daughter. She's been living at a convent, she thinks she's becoming a nun, but she's not, you're gonna marry her. And it kind of becomes this almost slapstick road trip while he and his new wife are like going up to their new castle where they're going to live, like up in the north, and somebody's trying to kill one of them and they don't know who it is. I thought this book was a very fun time in a very stupid way. And it does get a little frustrating because he becomes extremely controlling at some points where he's like, you're not allowed to go to the animals, because she had worked with the animals at the convent and she loved doing that. She's kind of like a vet situation, veterinarian. And he's like, you're not allowed to leave the castle, you're not allowed to do anything, because he thinks that the second she steps outside, she's going to cheat on him with the stable boy like his fiance did. But they fall in love and it turns out fine. And I just thought it was really fun. And then, so I gave it 4 stars, mostly on just like fun vibes. But then I read The Brat by Lynsay, which despite having an almost identical cover, came out 7 years later. And the quality drop, I can't even begin to explain. This book is so annoying. Another medieval historical romance. This time it's about like the niece of the king, and she has this big reputation in the court for being just like a bitch, a crybaby. She's spoiled, she's a brat, she's just the worst. Everybody just gives her what they want because they don't want to deal with her getting mad. And the guy, this is like post-Black Plague, so they're all coming back to court and being like, we really need to rebuild our communities because so many people died. And it's kind of a weird energy, but he's like, I need to marry someone rich, and I don't want to marry her, she's the worst. But then he overhears her talking to a friend being like, thank you for giving me the advice to act like such a bitch so people wouldn't bully me anymore. So he is eavesdropping and hears that, and then walks away, and then eavesdrops and overhears another person being like, oh my god, we just heard her say that she's pretending to be a brat, we should try to trick her into marrying you. And the guy who's saying that, it sucks. So then the main character is like, I need to stop them from tricking her into marrying him because he sucks. And then it's just kind of the amount of overhearing and eavesdropping that completely eliminates any tension or conflict in this book. It happens like 10 times. It often happens multiple times in the same chapter, that this is like the device that the author is using to like get around information. I can't even. And then the whole thing about her being a brat, they get married like fairly early in the book. And then the thing about her being a brat never comes up again. What was the point? What was the point of it? So anyway, I gave this book like 2 stars. It was really annoying. Then the next book I read was Nimona. This is a graphic novel by ND Stevenson, who is the creator of She-Ra, the animated show on Netflix, not the original one, obviously. I've only seen the first season of She-Ra, but it's supposed to be really good, so I should watch that soon. Anyway, Nimona is the center character on the cover. She is a shapeshifter, and she shows up. There's 2 people on the cover with her. The dark-haired one is a wizard, and she shows up and is like, I want to be your apprentice. And he's like, I don't want an apprentice. And she's like, well, I'm here. So, and it's like kind of a funny kind of buddy situation where they kind of almost found family kind of vibe to each other. And they're in conflict with the guy with blonde hair who's a knight who works for the government. And I honestly, I did not love this as much as I thought I would. I gave it 3 stars. I did like it. I found it enjoyable. I just think it wasn't what I was expecting. I think I thought it was kind of going to be a little bit more girl gang D&D energy. I have no idea why I thought that, but I got into it and I was like, where are her friends? Where are Nimona's friends? Because I thought she just like had a group of friends that they like did stuff together, and that wasn't the plot at all. So it was partially on me for not loving the what the actual story was and having wrong expectations, but also I wasn't super overwhelmed with how much I loved this book. I thought it was just fine. Next, I have another graphic novel called Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo. I really liked this one. The art is beautiful. Nimona was originally a webcomic, and that inherently has a different style that comes along with it. It's a little bit more simplistic so that it's easier to kind of like get out on schedule, and I understand that. I'm not like comparing the two. However, the art in Over My Dead Body is so gorgeous. I honestly think the cover does it a disservice because it's a little bit more simplistic because it's so close up on the main character, but the backgrounds, the settings in this book are gorgeous, and I do want to buy my own copy. Anyway, this is about a magic school for witches. Again, I don't remember any characters' names, but the general plot is that it begins with one of the witches at this school going missing, and then the next day the main character wakes up, and I guess they had been like buddies, like they pair up older students with younger students, and she was the older of in this pair, and she's like, where's my friend? And so she and a couple of her other witch friends are going to the library to look in old books and studying and investigating the grounds, and it kind of reveals an old event that happened like 100 years ago at a school where another student went missing in similar circumstances, and it kind of becomes this multi-generational conspiracy mystery that they're trying to solve. I really loved this book. I think the weakest part of this is that you're supposed to feel like it's kind of a found family situation with very close ties between all of these students. However, because the book starts up and you don't really get to see any backstory of their relationship, you're just kind of told that they're best friends or told that they are roommates and they're really close. You don't really get to see any of that, so you just kind of feel like, why are they trying so hard to work together to find this friend? You don't really get any of that context. So that, I think, is the weakest part of this. I just thought it was beautiful. So the last book I'm going to talk about here is The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This was fantastic. It was a historical sapphic romance between a younger woman and an older widow. She's not that old. She's like in her early 40s, probably late 30s. Anyway, it's about a young woman, don't remember their names, don't ask, and she had been working with her father for several years. He was an astronomer, and she was really, for the past several years, due to like mental decline and health issues, doing basically all of his calculations, sending his work into like different science journals, like doing all of his work. And he was really getting all of the credit for it, but he has now passed away, and her brother is like, well, you can't just keep, playing at doing that. You need to get married and figure it out. And she's like, I need to figure out how to be independent. He can't take the stars away from me. So she finds out that one of the men that her father had worked with in the astronomy realm had passed away, and his widow was now looking for someone to do the calculations on his final set of observations to see if he had discovered anything. And so she takes it upon herself to appear on the doorstep of this widow and say, I will do the work if you take a chance with me. And they end up working together, falling in love. It's so good. It is so well done. It is so good. I loved them. I also really think that it did a good job of showing the development of their relationship. It wasn't instantaneous, and you really feel like it's more realistic. I think in a lot of historical fiction, which I'm not complaining, I love this, it's often a little unrealistic how perfect people are for each other. You just feel that chemistry with them. And with this particular couple, there was still chemistry, don't get me wrong, but it also felt realistic in that these were two people who could, even in current day, have met and figured it out and worked on their relationship and had conflict and had realistic issues that they worked through together, while also being deeply romantic. I thought this book was so good. I give it 4.75 stars. So yeah, those are all the books that I want to talk about in this video. Let me know if you've read any of them. Let me know what you thought. I think of all the ones that I mentioned, my favorite was probably The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, then Over My Dead Body, then A House with Good Bones. That's kind of where I'm sitting with all of those. So yeah, hope you had a good time watching this video, and I will see you soon.